My name is Warren Spector. I'm the studio director at Other Side Entertainment's Austin, Texas office. I'm a 35-year veteran of game development, probably best known for games like Deus Ex, Disney Epic Mickey, and about 20 others.
I'll go ahead and start here. Like after all these years, you teamed up with Other Side Entertainment to go back to System Shock, because I know System Shock Raise currently works. How does it feel to go back after like all these years and try something new with the franchise?
It feels great going back to System Shock, and something I worked on in 1993 and 1994. Pretty incredible. One of the reasons it feels so good is because fans want it so badly. When you look at the last year or two, System Shock 1 and System Shock 2 from the 90s actually sold 1 million copies, the original games, which says there's a fan base out there that really wants this, and I'm pretty excited to give it to them.
Do you feel that, I know that after you left Disney you went to University of Texas, so do you feel that for the game development industry, do you feel like we're getting closer to needing an additional degree outside the bachelor's?
I'm not sure we need an additional degree outside of the bachelor's degree. Frankly, I'm not even sure we need a bachelor's degree. What you need is to be great at whatever you do. If you're a programmer, you have to be the best. If you're an artist, you have to be the best. And you have to know what kind of artist you are. Are you an environment artist? Are you an animator? Who are you? If you're a designer, be the best designer you can be. And the ways to prove that are to have a portfolio of some kind, and also to have made games. That's the one bit of advice I keep giving people who want to make games. Make games. Show that you can actually do it. Now, having said that, it's a good thing to have a degree. Obviously, I went to the University of Texas to create a game development program, so I believe in higher education. But that alone isn't necessarily enough to get you a degree. You still need to do that outside of work.
I can keep going.
Yeah, go for it. You want another question? Fire it up.
So, I know way back in the day, you were the co-producer of Wing Commander. So, what is your opinion of Star Citizen?
I think it's pretty exciting that Chris Roberts is back in game development, and the fact that he's doing a game like Star Citizen is also pretty exciting. One of the reasons to do a reboot like that, and Star Citizen is clearly the next step beyond the Wing Commander games, but one of the most exciting reasons to go back to it is because there's a genre that isn't being well served. There aren't a lot of space combat games out there. There certainly aren't a lot of space combat games that let you land on another ship and attack it and land on a planet and take off from a planet. So Chris, as usual, has some grand plans, but the big thing is he's going back and serving gamers who aren't being well served by the major companies. So I'm pretty excited to play it myself.
The gaming scene has changed quite a bit since you got started. Now we're seeing all these indie companies just coming up on the rise. What do you think about like all these great developers just coming out of the woodwork?
I think maybe the most exciting thing that's going on in game development right now is the rise of the indie movement. We have amazing original games coming out when the major publishers are really focusing on sequels and adaptations and reboots and remasters. Most of the original work is coming from the indie scene, and the fact that there's an indie scene is a radical difference from where we were even 10 years ago, and I attribute that to the rise of game engines and digital distribution. It used to be that if you wanted to make a game, you had to be a part of a large company. Now, if you have an idea for a game, there's a game engine that will let you make it. There's a distribution method that will let you get that game to an audience. That's amazing. I love the indie movement. I'm so glad it exists right now.
Not to mention the fact that you have companies like Microsoft and Nintendo actually giving it more attention and trying to make it part of their bigger picture.
I think the larger publishers see the value in supporting smaller developers. They're not great at creating new things, And they really can't be. The risks are so high when the cost of developing a game is ridiculously high, which it is now. And the timelines associated with making a big game are so long, 2, 3, 4 years. For them to take the risk and risk their shareholders' money is asking a lot. So I think they see a lot of the original content, a lot of future intellectual properties coming from those indie developers, and a lot of the talent that they want to recruit coming from the indie scene. So it's only natural that Microsoft and Sony and even Nintendo would be supporting indie development. And I think it's a great development.
So what's your opinion of producers who basically gained ownership over IPs, basically sitting on those IPs when perhaps the creators that started the movement want to desperately work with that IP? The question, I mean, it's Ron Gilbert with Monkey Island and it's Disney, but
you're really trying to get me in trouble, aren't you?
Just a little bit.
I think it's unfortunate when major publishers sit on IP and don't do anything with it. When Junction Point, my last studio, was acquired by Disney, Disney acquired ownership not just of my studio and my staff, but also of the intellectual property we were creating. I was working on an epic fantasy role-playing game. I was working with the film director John Woo on a modern-day ninja game. I had another game concept that, I mean, frankly, it was Deus Ex with the serial numbers filed off, and they now own it. And they'll never do anything with it, which I think is kind of sad. So I think it's a shame from a personal perspective, but also I think from the perspective of gamers, they're being denied access to original ideas or the rebooting of ideas that they might find really appealing, and that could be produced for far less money than the publishers actually are willing to support. So I think it's a real shame that they won't give up their IP or support them. But as I've said many times, it's kind of to be expected. They have multi-billion-dollar franchises to support. Why would they do a Sleeping Giants, Warren Spector's epic fantasy game, or Ron Gilbert's Monkey Island, when they could do another Call of Duty? You have to understand their reasons for them doing what they do. But it's kind of sad for guys like me.
But there is sort of a slight resurgence with like retro titles. I mean, we saw Crash Bandicoot come back last year, Metroid Prime's coming back. I mean, some people do recognize the value of a retro franchise, but there's also risk with that, right?
It's funny you say that because I'm giving a talk about that this afternoon.
Nice.
Well, it's from a developer's point of view, so I'm not sure how relevant it's going to be to the MomoCon audience, but we'll see. There certainly is a resurgence in... Yeah, let me try that again. There certainly is a resurgence in interest in old properties. They're coming out of the woodwork now. I see that as partly coming from the major players who are looking for something new to offer their audience. But a lot of it is coming from old developers begging and screaming and going to Kickstarter to relive their youths and stuff. So I think there are a lot of reasons why it's happening now, and I'm excited about it. The difference between what's happening in the reboot area and the major publishing area is Kickstarter. I haven't done a Kickstarter myself, but it's pretty exciting when a developer can go directly to an audience, find out that there is an audience, and actually get funded that way. So there is no, Uber master behind the scenes pulling the strings and owning the intellectual property.
We've got about 10 minutes left.
What's your opinion of like fan-made games, like individuals who just want to remake or put their own spin on an existing IP?
I'm not terribly familiar with that, to be honest, but there are certainly people making fan updates of Deus Ex, for example. which is pretty cool. But there's also the mod community. I'm not sure the mod community is as vital as it was 10, 15 years ago, but certainly it's exciting when players enjoy something so much that they want to give it a life beyond the people who created it. That's magic. I mean, when IDOS started making new versions of Deus Ex and Thief, people ask me all the time how I felt about that. And my answer is very similar to my answer about fan-made games, and that's, I'm totally psyched about it. Those franchises have a life beyond me and beyond my teams. It's like I had a baby and now it's all grown up and left home. How could you not be excited about that? So any developer who is unhappy with or upset about the idea of fans making games set in their universe or remaking the games that they made is being kind of foolish, I think.
Not to mention the fact that success could pretty much come from anywhere. Somebody makes a mod about something, next thing you know, we have the battle royale genre, where millions of dollars are made with Fortnite.
Yeah, certainly. Lots of games that we know and love today started as indie games made by fans. There's no question about that. And even beyond that, well, maybe not beyond that, but not quite as cool as that is the talent pool that comes out of that. When I look to hire new level designers, for example, on System Shock 3, or on Deus Ex, or on Epic Mickey, I can look to the mod community and say, hey, this person really has it. They understand how to build a level. They understand scripting. There was one time, way long ago, a programmer came to Origin. This is when we were working on Ultima 6, and he handed us a disc and said, this is my version of Ultima 5 that I made by myself, and it's all there. He actually recreated a game that took a team of people at Origin. And that guy, needless to say, got a job and is still working in the game business. So fan-made games, the mod community, they're an incredible source of talent for the more mainstream game developers.
It sure beats a resume, huh?
Anybody who comes to me with just a resume has a 0% chance of getting a job. 0. I need to see a portfolio, and more important, I need to see that you can finish something. The big difference between a college student typically and a fan typically is that they start something, which is really important, don't get me wrong, but they start something and then they don't finish it. If you can't show that you're a finisher, the odds that you're going to get a job are pretty slim too.
Is there that one IP out there that you're just dying to get your hands back on, or maybe get your hands on to begin with, that you would love to have creative control over?
Well, let me put it this way. I'm wearing Mickey Mouse socks and a Disney shirt right now. I would just about kill to have access to Scrooge McDuck and Donald and the DuckTales crew.
Oh, man.
I would settle for getting back to Mickey Mouse, and I would die if I could make a game starring Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. So it's all Disney for me, which fans find kind of odd. I'm kind of known as the guy who makes games about guys who wear trench coats in the summer and sunglasses at night and carry 2 guns, which they don't always have to use, which is kind of nice. But at heart, I'm kind of a Disney freak.
It's nice to have something different in mind, though. It's like, say, if you get stuck in a rut, like developing on one franchise forever, you start to feel like you're in that rut. So sometimes you just have to find something different, and it challenges you, doesn't it?
It's absolutely a challenge moving to a new genre or a new kind of game. I remember way back in the day again, I had worked on so many fantasy role-playing games. I just realized if I had to make another fantasy game, I was just going to die. And that's where System Shock came from. I was talking to some of the other team members, in particular Doug Church, a secret master of gaming who should be famous and isn't. We were talking one day about how we didn't want to make another fantasy game, and that's where the science fiction game System Shock came from. And after Deus Ex and Deus Ex Invisible War and Thief Deadly Shadows, I really needed to do something different. And when Disney made me the offer to make a Mickey Mouse game and bring Oswald the Lucky Rabbit back to the Disney family, I just couldn't say no. I had to make that game. And the fact that it was a third-person game gave me the opportunity to exercise some new muscles. I had always made first-person games, at least since 1994. And making a third-person game was a completely different challenge, so that was pretty cool.
So, I'm surprised I haven't asked this question yet, but what were your influences to get into the game industry?
My influences to get into the game industry were Avalon Hill board games and SPI hardcore board games, and most important, Dungeons & Dragons and Call of Cthulhu. I think that's true of everybody in the game business who's willing to admit how big a nerd he or she is, you know? I mean, every day, everybody in the game business, whether they started out playing D&D or not, should just get down on the ground, face Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and say a little prayer of thanks to Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. I mean, without them, there would be no video game business, period, end of story. So, Gary and Dave, thanks for everything you did for me and for the world.
I got nothing. I'm good.
I know you're in the midst of working on System Shock and Underworld Ascendant and all that, but are there any games that are out now that have your attention? I mean, I don't know how much of an avid gamer you are outside of making your own stuff, but are there any games right now that have your attention?
What I tell people who get into the game business is be careful, because you're going to find yourself playing way fewer games. It's really true. Right now, just to be completely honest, the games I'm playing are Underworld Ascendant and System Shock 3. And I'm playing them incessantly. But I certainly have played the new Zelda game, Breath of the Wild. And it's interesting because whether it's really there or not, maybe I'm just feeding my own ego, but I see a little bit of the immersive simulation aspect that comes from some of the games that I've worked on and the Looking Glass teams worked on and Irrational worked on, maybe some Bethesda games. I'm seeing a little bit of influence there, so that's exciting. And going back a little bit further, Cuphead. I mean, as a cartoon freak, seeing Cuphead was just amazing to me. So those are probably the two games that have caught my interest. And of course, you know, a new Mario Kart. Yeah, you have to play a new Mario Kart.
Yeah.
So those are pretty much the games that I've been thinking about playing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody. We've got some time for pictures if anyone would like some.
Sure.